Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from Central British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us and saying, oh, we know where Canada is, in British Columbia on the West Coast, right? Right. And so that's where we are. Beautiful place. And then today, a very, very special guest. Madelaine Weiss is a Harvard-trained licensed psychotherapist, mindset expert, board-certified executive, career and life coach who helps busy people master their minds so they can maintain and enjoy satisfaction and success in all areas of their lives. That reminds me somewhat of myself at 85, and with all the things that I do. This morning I got caught up in one thing and then in the other thing, and my God, and I got to you 3 minutes late. So, and I'm trying not to, always to be on time, and and here we are. So,
my grandson recently got married, and they did this really beautiful thing. They wrote all the guests a personal note. So when you sat down at your seat, there was this personal note, and among other really gorgeous things he said to me, one of them was, and I thought of it because you said that you were 3 minutes late, that I taught him how to be patient. And I didn't know if that meant that I was patient or that he learned how to be patient because he had to be patient with me. So I didn't have a chance to ask yet, but I will. Anyway.
I like it, Madelaine. So it's one of those things that, and I'm sure you run into it, we all do from time to time. And then trying to be on time always is one important thing for me in my life, always has been. And then sometimes things, one thing after the other, and blah, blah, blah. But so we're here, and I'm looking forward to our podcast. So but the first thing that strikes me about you, you're also an author and obviously a speaker and a presenter, and getting to G.R.E.A.T, G.R.E.A.T, 5-step strategy for work and life, and we'll talk about that as well. So share with here. Oh, I love it. And so that is your last. Can you do it once more? I was blinking somebody else.
Well, this is the one for adults.
Right.
And then all of my clients were saying, how come no one ever told me this when I was 8? So I thought, all right, fine.
So when did that come out, Madelaine?
Like last year, something.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2024.
It's available on all the typical, all in English or also other languages or?
English.
So far. So far, yeah. And so share with us, how it all started. And obviously, as soon as I hear Harvard, high reputation of having that on your credentials levels brings it up quite a bit higher. And tell us, how did you get there? And then obviously you started studying in a particular field, therapist. Is that what you studied at Harvard? And then how did you go from there and got to where we are today, more or less, and all the things in between? How did it begin? How did you get to Harvard? How did you do your studies there? And where did you go from there?
Oh, what a big question. What a big question. So I did not find out that I was smart until I was much older than I think other people are when they find out that they are. And I remember I did not go to college when most people go to college. I started when I was 25. And so I remember doing an honors program and giving a presentation through this program. And they said something like, we doubt that she knows how brilliant she is. And I think, well, you got that right. That never occurred to me. But my professors were very enthusiastic about my applying to Harvard. So to your question, that's how that got started. But the kind of quirkiness of the story is that I actually got in and turned them down. And there might be some element of my sense of self not having caught up with who I turned out to be. But also, I was a mom with a wife, and I had a child, and a small child, a young child. And I had read this book called Toughing It Out at Harvard. I even remember the author's name. This was so long ago. Her name was Fran Worden, I think. And it was Toughing It Out at Harvard. And she made it sound like it would destroy my family. She said something about someone in her family passed away and she didn't even care. I thought, oh my God, I don't want that to happen to me.
Exactly.
So it took me a week to finally put the rejection postcard in the mailbox. And I did. I turned them down. But along the way, after that, I'm a learning junkie. So I just kept learning and learning and learning. And on that path, there were other opportunities where I could do my internships at Harvard, which I did 2 years in a row, and took all my continuing education courses there because I lived in the Boston area. And then I worked at Harvard Medical School for 13 years. So I kind of made that up to myself. I love the education that I got, however I got it. And I'm just really grateful when I'm working with my clients to have all of that under my belt.
Amazing background, really, isn't it?
It's crazy, I know.
You know, and the
like, who does that? Who turns down?
Yeah, so it makes me wonder, you know, so a psychotherapist is what, and what specialty and what foundation does it lay for what you did later, which is very, very important, obviously, because that study that you did at Harvard became the foundation, in addition to all the other things around it, obviously, to where you are today.
Well, there was a transition point.
Okay.
So mostly I started out with a very classical training on unconscious conflicts and making those conscious so that we're in charge of them instead of them in charge of us, kind of thing.
Right.
But I started developing this kind of a pet peeve, which was that people stay in therapy for a very long time and kind of appreciate the empathy, and nothing changes and nothing gets better. And so that even hooks them in because nothing's getting better. So they continue to need the support because nothing really got. And I read a book. Alan Wheelis wrote How People Change. And his bottom line was they just do. And what I mean by that, and what I think he meant by that, is that you have to take some action. You can't just sit there and talk about it. You know, people would think if they dug deep enough, there would be this aha that would change everything without them doing anything.
Right.
And so that was when I pivoted to coaching.
Right.
So William James said, action doesn't guarantee happiness, but there's no happiness without it.
Yeah.
And that I live by that and I work by that. Like, so everybody who works with me knows that at the end of the session, I'm going to ask them what they are going to take with them from this session and how they're going to use it, like what their action step might be. Because if they're not using it in a practical way in their life, what's the point of it?
Exactly. So it puts you into the direction of executives in particular of corporations likely, but not exclusively, but is the specialty in particular that you are being brought into teams around corporate structures that are doing analysis of, in particular, of their senior, not senior, but the middle levels that are struggling with pressure on the one side, stress on the other side, and trying to find direction, and then involving communication skills and all of those foundational issues that are so important to become successful in working in teams, may that be major executive teams, major companies, or mid-sized companies, or whatever size of companies. All those elements are critically important, but bringing them together in a team or understanding them as to what their role should be, how they become effective communicators is critically important.
Actually, I'm not doing that.
Okay.
So I'm not working with the teams about their CEOs.
Okay.
I'm working with the CEOs one-on-one. And I remember when I was working at Harvard Medical School, they had asked me to address the first year class before and after their anatomy segment, which is pivotal, I think. It's a real window of opportunity to help the students sort of hang on to their humanity while they're, so highly developing these scientific and clinical skills. It's very easy to not pay enough attention to hanging on to this other part of them, what they call bedside manner, I suppose, to be simple-minded about it. And I remember the first time I did it, I looked out on this sea of students, and I worked in the building, so I'd see them all the time. And they're like bouncing off their lockers and running around like crazy. But in this setting, they were very, very still. I asked them to fall still, and they did. I thought, oh my God, I just asked the first year medical class at Harvard Medical School to fall still. And they did. And it was the most beautiful thing to see. And it was years ago. I'm still so moved by it because my thought was, I just laid hands on people who are going to lay hands on so many others in their lives as they go forward. So to me, rather than to have the teams yang about their bosses, I would really rather get in to where I feel like I can make most difference, and then they can do well with their teams or do better. So that's kind of what I'm doing. And a lot of the people that I work with are, this is a whole area of study, but they're so talented that in ways they began to feel like their performance was all, which again, just like those medical students I was telling you about, they lose a certain connection to their own humanity, and it affects everything in their life, not in a good way. So I like to put like Humpty Dumpty back together again as a whole person with a right brain and a left brain and a heart and a mind and a soul and all of that in one.
And that's really not taught at Harvard or anywhere else, really. It was brought in, that's why they brought you in then, I suppose.
I have a surprise for you.
Yeah, okay.
I studied, believe it or not, Veda Vedanta pre-Hindu tradition for 20 to 25 years. And
Wow.
So So like I have this toolkit which has so much like stuff that is so different from the coaching and the psychotherapy and the Advaita Vedanta. All of that is in there. So there's no telling what I'll be, because it's very interactive in the work, what I'll be pulling out when.
Describe to us, as the people watching us around the world, saying, what was it that you studied in the last 25 years or became aware of that became such an important part of what you do even today? What is it all about? What does it, and I know that that would be a long story, but if you can put it into as simple a form as we can, and the critical pieces of it that are really not being made aware to many people, but that made the difference for you as you brought it in to the normal discussions.
Well, you know, at some point, I said to myself, these people are doing great. Like, what are you doing? You know, it's like, what are you doing? And that's how I came up with this 5-step process. It's like,
And the acronym there is, when I looked at it, it said GREAT, G.R.E.A.T, and saying, what does it stand for? What does it mean?
so I realized that when people came, and again, this I called that in retrospect. It wasn't like I came up with this method and applied it. It was that I noticed people were doing well and I wanted to crystallize, like, what's the recipe? So I was cooking it without a recipe, and then I figured it anyway. So the G stands for grounding.
Okay.
So when people come to me, they don't say to me, I want you to help me make a great life. They're usually in some sort of pain and they can't figure it out. And they tell me that when they look at my profile, they see head and heart. So, and also some of them, you know, it's funny, some people have an aversion to the Harvard, which I understand, but some people are drawn to it. So anyway, they come to me because they think I might be someone who can help them with whatever this thing is that's not sitting right with them. And when I say grounding, so I hold ground for them. I know that it doesn't have to be like that. I've seen enough people get from here to there. So I hold that ground for them until they can step onto it, believe in it, and run with it on their own. So that's the G.
So that may well be a challenge in its own, to have them find the ground. Who are you and what are you, and bringing them to accepting that as they then go forward from there. But they first have to be grounded.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could have made it a B for believe, but that wouldn't have worked with the acronym. So, but it is this believing, being grounded in the belief
Okay.
that it doesn't have to be like this and they can have a great life.
Okay. And then
The R.
yes.
So the first line of the book is, a great life depends on a great fit between who we are and the environments in which we work and live. It sounds very Darwinian, and I think it's as true today as it ever was, that we need to fit with the environment in which we work and live. What's different now is we have some say so about that, that when we were tiny little organisms, we didn't. But in order for one to fit with one's environment, like, we need to know who we are. We need to recognize, that's the R, recognize who we are, so that we can then GRE, go exploring And the who we are is maybe it's not necessarily who someone else said we should be. It's not even necessarily who we always thought we should be. So there's a discovery period there. And then there's like a whole big world out there. And, you know, some people were told they were supposed to be this or that when they grow up, especially like for women. You know, there were certain things you were supposed to do and other things that didn't quite suit. And now you go exploring. And sometimes it's things people thought of how they'd like to live their lives, but then they went, nah. Or just, you know, it was something they never even thought of. So that's the exploration. But like I said, William James said that we need action. And so that's the A, is for the action. So people sort of get on a path, and it's not necessarily a straight line. I always like to say each action is with consideration to the outcome of the one that went before it. So it's an ongoing creative process forward in some direction. And then most people, what do they say? We spend like 70% of our lives in our comfort zone or more. So the T is tackling or taming, however you like to think about it, the resistance to the change, which is very much part of it. There's very often, who do you think you are? Kind of, what do you think you're doing? Kind of feeling that comes up when an individual is about to take a step out of where they've always been. And I know this because I've done it many times. I'm like a cat, you know, like I have all these many lives. Yeah. And I've had people that I'm working with who actually have stayed with me for quite a long time, which I don't allow if nothing's changing. Because, like I said, I have a peeve about that. But who have just absolutely transformed their lives over and over again. An example is a woman who thought she was so independent she would never be able to live with anyone, even let alone. And of course, now she's married and has 2 kids. And she was working in defense and thought she'd like fintech. And so she's one side of the country to another, and things just get better and better and better as she takes these risks. And the more we take risks, the easier it is to do that, because we know we got somebody here who can do this, who can, someone inside ourselves that we can count on.
So the interesting part about this, and I find it extremely interesting, especially with your background, is obviously like in our podcast that hopefully is being shown across the world and to a lot of people that are interested in the topic of how do we go about deciding, so that, correct me if I'm wrong, already when you know you're going to be on a podcast with me, you already automatically do kind of an evaluation or grounding, or figure out who is this guy, what kind of podcasting does he do and why, and so then the other part of it is, on my part, is that who am I has always been a big part of my life, going through, and I was born in 85 years ago in northeastern Holland at the beginning of the Second World War, went through all the ups and downs that followed that, got affected by PTSD, the inner child, all of that sort of thing. Then academically was not a success story. I failed grade 3, failed grade 7 3 times, where they said to my parents, "Oh, what are you going to do with this guy at 12 and a half years old?" They said, "Well, send him to the mentally challenged school." They said, "No, we're not going to do that." teach them a trade, and the teachers at the time, and I loved the teachers and all of those things, they said, well, this guy will not amount to much, but he should get a good trade, because he's not smart enough otherwise, because he's always the worst in the class when we do tests. But I always kind of thought that I was just as smart as all the others, but I was different. And so then we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945, 80 years ago. And,
how old were you?
Pardon me?
How old were you then?
5 years old. It made such an impression on me, having gone through all the challenges, and then when they liberated us on April the 12th, had not had food and all those other things, the horror stories that go with war, and it made such an impression on me that I knew from that point forward that once I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I did. And then the other part was that my dad, when I failed grade 7 for the third time, he had a friend that had a furniture factory and said, let's send John there. Jan was my name then, Jan. Everybody here called me John. Okay, John then, but in any event, they sent me there. And so I became a furniture maker, and in the evenings I would go to classes to become a furniture maker. So lumber always played a part in my life. So my dream was to go to Canada, and the second month to build a lumber mill. And then, although I already was quite successful in Holland, when I was 24, I decided I'd go to Canada. And I wanted to start with nothing. So I had a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money. And I flew into Montreal, and then took the train from Montreal to Vancouver. 4 days, 5 nights. My God, that is a long way. And in any event, came off the train in Vancouver, went to the immigration office, couldn't speak English, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. But there was a German fellow, I could speak some German, and I told him what I wanted to do, build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George, that is center of British Columbia, that's where I am today. And so, that is about for a guest watching us, about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers, which puts it in the center of British Columbia, north-south, east-to-west, and a big, big province. So I arrived here on the Greyhound, 13 hours from Vancouver, and I can still see where the Greyhound station used to be. And I had my suitcase, I had 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But I always had, even through all the ups and downs, I always, in my own little world, I had positive attitude, and I avoid, even still today, negative, don't even come close to me. And then I had a passion. Whatever I do, I give it 120%. And then work ethic, but will follow is success. And so,
where do you think you got that from?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I believe I already had that when I was young, after the war years, and so when things were difficult, I already started to be entrepreneurial. I was active, and I always was busy. And I'm a go-go guy even today. So, so that now I turned 85 last Saturday, I think, and November the 1st. And so I get up even now, 10 different companies and all those other kind of things, being successful. But, I get up at 5:30. I always make my bed and I always think I'm late. And every day when I get up, I look outside and I say, it's paradise. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. And I don't always understand why other people don't think the same, saying we are the most fortunate people in North America compared to the...
Do you think that the early adversity had anything to do with
I believe so. To have seeing the anxiety that we have during the war years is that, just a little bit of a background here, Madelaine, you can then appreciate, is my mom and dad were married in 1938. So they were the happiest people in the world. My dad had a job in a lumber company. They had rented this duplex site, and very quickly they had a boy and a girl. And then my mom, early in 1940, was pregnant with me. And then the dictator Adolf Hitler decided that Poland should become part of Germany. And then it was obvious that he would not be satisfied with that. He would go further into Western Europe. So my dad then was called into the Dutch army. And the last time that they saw him was, and that was in April of 1940, was just before the bombing of Rotterdam, where Hitler had decided that Holland didn't capitalized early enough, and so he bombed Rotterdam. That's the last place. And for 5 years, they would not know if he lived or died. So it became very, very challenging for my mom, obviously in a war setting, because the Germans took over Holland and that part of Holland, and everybody had the same issues. So they were pretty much on their own. And the next things that I remember is the bombers in the air, hundreds of bombers, and 200, 300, and that was in 1943 to 1945. But then daytime, nighttime bombing. My mom would take us outside on the deck at the house because she felt safer outside than inside. And in the distance, we were only 10 minutes from the German border. We could see the cities burning in the distance, and so it always stayed with me, even still today. And then the next one that I really remember was 1944, when they had cut off all the food supply, and that there was nothing to eat. And so I can still feel the hunger even still today. And so we would go, my brother, my sister, myself, every morning we go with gunny sacks into the railroad yard to pick up anything edible and burnable. And so, and the reason that we did is the Germans would boot us one, but we'd be back the following day. And then the next thing that I obviously remember that changed my life is the liberation. We saw far too much that we should not have seen. That, as you can well visualize, northeastern Holland, as the Allied forces landed in Normandy, the US, the UK, and Canada. The US went east and south, and the Canadian Army went north through France, Belgium, western part of Holland, and then to the top where we were is just before the German border. So things got pretty difficult and tough down there, and we saw far too much that we should not have seen. And so that part always stayed with me. And then obviously we were fed by the Canadians, with the bread and the cheese, and the butter was bigger than the bread. And every morning we would go there. We call everybody Johnny. Obviously, we just didn't speak the language, but really we did, right? So that's where the dream came from, to go to Canada and then start from there. So that may have had the inner child was something very, very important, that I got counseling for that in my 50s, actually. And
Wow.
I had no idea then, but very, very emotional,
Do you know, you're reminding me of this book that's been on the bestseller list forever. And for some reason, I'm not capturing the author, but the name of the book is The Body Keeps the Score. Do you know? Have you
No.
heard?
No, I
Well,
have not.
I don't know. I don't know if you're into that kind of reading, but you reminded me of it because I think his point is it's not just up here. What's happened to you or us or anyone lives at the cellular level within our bodies. I remember reading it myself years ago. That's why it's so astounding that it's still on the bestseller list. Just sobbing my heart out. I don't even remember over what, but
Yeah.
I was so touched by the impact of that idea that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, have you ever heard the story about Thomas Edison and his mother?
Not I'm familiar with
school?
Thomas Edison, but
So you said you flunked seventh grade 3 times, and you reminded me of this story that I'm going to share with you. So one day, the teachers send little Thomas home with a note for his mother. And the note, he gives the note to his mother. I don't know if this is true or not, but I love it. He gives the note to his mother, and his mother reads the note to him. And the note says, little Thomas is very, very smart. In fact, she's reading, is very, very smart. In fact, he's so smart that we actually can't educate him here. You're going to have to educate him yourself or somewhere else, because we just don't have what it takes to work with someone this smart.
interesting.
Then at some point, his mother passes away, and Thomas goes through her papers and he finds the letter. What the letter said, what the letter really said, was that
It's the opposite.
he was extremely challenged and they couldn't do a thing with him. So here, you do it, we're done. And
Sounds familiar. So
I wonder if it's true. I don't know whether it's true.
I wouldn't
or
be
not,
surprised because I remember, these my brother and my sister, and my sister was 1 year older than me, my brother 2 years older, and this was still in Holland. And I always remember that just in school, the teacher would say, if they had tests, they would say, they read it off, 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest by number, is saying Peter had a 9.5, and Margaret had a 7.5, and then Case had an 8, and John, as usual, had a 0. And so, and everybody got discharged out of it, because I was just not bright enough. But then my sister at one point said that I always remember that we had a discussion at the table, just the family, just us, the 3 of us and my mom and dad. And she said, the only one in this family that ever will become a multimillionaire is John. I said, oh my God. Never thought about it that way. It doesn't mean much to me now, but then it did, so.
I share your story. I had an older brother. Well, I have an older brother. And one in elementary school, the teacher said to me, how can a boy like him have a sister like you? Why can't you be like your brother? I got a C on my report card for sitting on my leg. I crossed my leg and they didn't want me to do that. And then my mother said to me, you are much smarter than your brother, but you must never tell anyone that I said that.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So that's why, all of that kind of feeds into being absolutely stunned when people started commenting on whatever it was that I was putting out there in my papers or whatever that my professors were I was shocked.
Now, the other part that I have to add, Madelaine, because it made a major change to my life, and it made me, for all the years, up to the time that I was 62, I was still wondering, who am I? And what changed it is that I went into a bookstore here. I already was here for 32 years, in 1997.
I can't wait to see which one it is. What is it?
And I walked into this bookstore. I have the actual book right here that I picked up, and it changed my life. And the title of the book is Driven to Distraction by Dr. Halliwell. And Dr. Halliwell is a medical doctor, professor, known around the world, has written 18 books, 5 on distraction. Yeah. This one is, after I read it, it's about ADHD and dyslexia.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, that's me. And so as I was standing in the
Look at your
bookstore,
book.
I was going through
Vintage.
this is the actual book. And so
Yeah.
I wrote in the book because I had
Who
no
was that?
idea. Say again?
I think he was at Harvard, and I think I met him there. Was he?
That could well be. So let me tell you a little bit more about it. Here is that, so when I saw the book, I bought the book, read it and saying, that is me. So then I wrote in the book, now in Dutch, because it was suggested that it may well be a mental disorder of some sort. Obviously we don't now. But, and so it was January 1997 that I wrote that. And I said, now I finally know who I am. And so now the other part about Dr. Hollywell is that you are my podcast number 493, and where I'm hosting. I did another 200 or so where I'm guesting. So I had Dr. Hollywell on my podcast number on the Brink 203. So what I did then is after I got the book and I started to look at Google and all the other things, and then was worried about it because I was building companies, made plans for bankers and finance people to put forward proposals and finding capital in particular. And if I did, and which I did in a lot of cases, so everybody else said, you're so successful, and I didn't feel that way. So then I waited about 5 years after I saw the book, and I went to my doc that was a personal friend and delivered our 2 daughters. And he said to me, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. And so we checked it out, and I do. And so that was in 1962. And so the point that I'm making is that at 12 and a half years old in Holland, you know, when some people would suggest I was just too dumb to amount to anything, I would be just labor working with my hands, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I'm proud of that today, actually. But in any event, so 50 years later, I'm diagnosed with ADHD, but it was always part of my life as I went through all the things. And then it started changing my life. And then looking back of it, I was always very good, even in school, on numbers. I was a very good writer, but not a good reader. And so I started to write books. And some people had said to me, John, you should write a book, but it's such an interesting life, blah, blah, blah. And so I tried for 20 years. Writing books, as you well know, is not easy, and especially not for me. And so I then knew about 6-7 years ago, when I already was in my 70s, if I don't do it now, it will never happen. So I wrote this book against all odds.
Yeah, wonderful.
And so it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2.5 years to write it. And then the other thing that I did, I felt the more I found out about ADHD and the frequency of occurrence and all the things around it, I felt I had an obligation to write a book about it. I did that as well.
Oh, good.
And so, you know, and then the other...
You know, it caught my attention that you said, and I finally knew who I am, because that can't be the whole of who you are.
No. But the challenge for me was always along the way, why am I different than the others? And, you know, my brother was 2 years older than me. Unfortunately, he passed away quite a number of years ago, but he was an engineer. He was brilliant and got studied at one of the top universities in Holland. And so, you know, and we had a very, very good relationship, and he admired the things that I did when I went to Canada, and I was going to make things as difficult as I could possibly make them, you know, with no money, no clothes. I knew I would build a lumber mill. And if you asked me, it would give you an indication of what were the 3 books that you had with you that were important. Then the one was Management by Drucker in Dutch. And then the other one was Logical Thinking in Dutch. And then the other one was about Canada. Those already from a very young age forward, I was always interested in listening to the people that were, at least in my mind, mainly business, were successful and why and how. Always was important to me. But it was not until I put all the pieces together in terms of ADHD in particular, and then realizing from my perspective, ADHD is potentially a superpower. And so a lot of people to me say now, at 85, how do you do all the things that you do? You're an author, and then you're in 10 different companies, and then the other thing that I do is one of the books that I wrote. It's Living Young, Dying Old, and that's a picture of me. Actually, I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And so they say to me, how do you do all this stuff? And I say, it's ADHD. That's how I do it.
You mentioned about your dad.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I lost my dad when I was 15 years old. So the dad thing is kind of big and important for me. So I was hearing you. Do you mind if I ask you?
Oh, no. So he did come back after the liberation. I already was 5 years old and saying, who is this guy? And when he came back, he had a helmet that he survived Rotterdam, then got underground and fought in the civilians underneath against the Germans and died nearly a number of times, had a bullet hole right through his helmet that barely missed his head. But when he came back, he was never the same individual. And so, although he was successful in businesses, he wouldn't speak.
Lumber, right?
Yeah.
Lumber.
Yeah.
Like
and
you.
Lumber, yeah. And so it became an example for me in a lot of ways. But, he was still so troubled by PTSD and all the things that happened, couldn't expose it as well as some people do now, so important. And so developed a drinking habit that was not good, but not on the street, but dependency on alcohol in a way. So it became challenging for him in a way, but I still, admire.
Did he live to see your success in lumber?
Yeah, to a certain extent. So he died when he was 80. He was born in 1915. So he was, then 80 years old. And he died in 1995. So, and I already had started to build companies, but I was still struggling with, the other part, Madelaine, and I was going to make a comment about it. You're a very, very good and effective communicator. I had challenges in that for many, many years too. I could interact with people in my surrounding areas, in the mill, maybe 2 or 3 people, but not outside of that. And it was not until I was then in 1990, I already was 50 years old, and that a friend said to me at one point, hey, John, why don't you go with me to Toastmasters? I said, Toastmasters, what is that all about? He said, communication skills. I said, are you going to ask me questions? He said, no, just come down and sit there. I said, oh, okay. So I went down there, sat down, and then in the middle of the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about it. I said, okay, I'll never go back here. But I did. I stayed there for 10 years, and it changed my life. and I became a distinguished Toastmaster, and obviously a presenter and a speaker and a podcaster and all the other things about it. And so, these elements that happen during life that are immensely changing things, may it be the Second World War, seeing too much, then the liberation, then the things with my dad, seeing him coming back, and then the success or lack of success in the formal education, and then going to Canada and then being successful there. And now at 62 is when everything changed, and I started to become an author and did a lot of other things. And it was basically reconciling, maybe internally grounding, who am I and what does it mean and where do I go from here to everything is possible.
So here's what comes to mind and heart about that. I think it was maybe Carl Rogers or someone who said, the tree wants to grow and the bird wants to fly, and so do we. And my shtick is that there's that life force in us. You know, people try to think what their purpose is, and I don't see it that way. They struggle to find out there. What I believe is that it's in every single one of us, yearning to be free. And if we get, so I teach meditation, mindfulness, and that sort of stuff. When we get quiet enough, when we make way, it will come to us and it will lead us. So I have this thing, like if I get a crazy idea to go somewhere or do something or write a book or whatever it is, and it seems crazy to me, and I go, yeah, and then it comes back, I start paying attention and will more often than not actually take action on things that keep bubbling up. So they're not from out there. It's never because someone else said so, but it's just this something, again, life force from within that may have led you to everywhere you are and everything you've manifested, to use the buzzword.
The interesting part about it, Madelaine, what I say a lot of times, a number of things. My foundation is attitude, passion, work ethic, what will follow is success. The other one is that a lot of people say, oh, you're so successful, and I want to be successful, and how do I said always, success is trying to find you. It's just a question, are you ready? And so and then the other one is the foundation of attitude, passion, work ethic, appreciating every day of our lives in these amazing countries that we are living in. And then the other part is giving back to the community and make the focus not making a lot of money, but rather what can you do to help others and be of benefit? That's why I'm writing my books. That's why I'm podcasting and doing all the things that I do. I'm writing another book right now, as I say, you can.
Nice.
Yes.
Good one.
Margaret, or Madelaine, this was a very quick hour going by. We're going to have to do this again at some point and stay in touch. Show us your books once more before we go.
Indeed. My son told me he just had his parent-teacher conference for my granddaughter, and the teacher said to him, she really likes to write. And my son said, this is her name here. She actually consulted with me on this because she was 8 years old and I wanted to know how things sat with her and what she would bring to this conversation. So he told the teacher that we just wrote a book on how the mind is a story that we live in. And once we realize we've created this story, we can actually make it a better story, which is the theme
Exactly.
of this book. And the teacher said, "Oh my God, can they come in and do a presentation?" So maybe little Gabby and I will do something.
I like that. Madelaine, it was an amazing podcast. I appreciate very much. Let's make sure we stay in touch.
Absolutely. It's a privilege and a pleasure to know you and to be part of your journey.
Thanks, Madelaine. And then the other part about it is that, my podcast, we release them within 2 hours. That's what I do on my podcast, and I do not edit it. All my podcasts are unedited, and I get them out of the door within 2 hours.
Also, I would like to mention that I offer a complimentary introductory strategy session. So on my website, MadelaineWeiss.com, if anybody wants to have a chat with me about their journey, I'd be happy to do that.
Excellent, Madelaine. And then for all those people watching us, both for Madelaine Weiss and myself, subscribe to our podcast, like it if you like it, share it with others, comment on it, and then again, check out Madeleine's books and her website as well.
There's free stuff on there. There's something called power breathing, which is a 30-second mindset reset that people can download. It's a one-page thing which can change your life because it produces that immediate quiet. So
I like it. I like it, Madelaine.
Hear yourself.
I like it, Madelaine. Thanks again.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.